Well, it looks like we're live. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, it's good to be here. Um, is there anybody out there? If you can hear me, give me a heads up. That'd be awesome. We had some technical difficulties coming on, and so it's awesome. Thanks so much for being here. Here we go. Yeah, right on. Coming on, and so, hey, thanks for joining us. We're running a little late today. Again, I was having a hard time getting on, and so we had to move things around. But here we are. Hey, my name is Gene Tagaban. I'm with the Native Wellness Institute, and you're welcome to the Power Hours. I think we're on like week 52, program 300 and something. Uh, I believe we're being sponsored by the Noise Foundation. But welcome, welcome, welcome. Cool. And although we're running a little late, thank you for joining us, those who are out there and those who are dedicated listeners as well. I just want to say is that I'm also coming to you live from the land of the territories of the Coast Salish people, the land of the Puyallup in Ruston, Washington at this time. And like to tell people in the shadows of Mount Tahoma, which is now referred to as Mount Rainier. I like to refer to as Mount Tahoma. So welcome, 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 everybody. Gonachish, gonachish. And I was going to talk a little bit about today about new directions. And before I get to that, new directions, I just want to share a little story with you. And this story is something I listened to when I was younger. And it's about a young man. There's a young man. And this young man, he was good at everything that he did. He was a good fisherman. He was a good hunter. They say that he could shoot a duck out of the air with an arrow. And his artwork was the best. He could carve the fastest, most beautiful canoe in no time at all. And he sat and he listened to the stories of the elders, the old ones. This young man, and he grew, he grew, he grew. It was one day that this young man, he was out fishing. He was out fishing. He was thought about all the things that he accomplished and who he was. And as he was out there fishing, he thought about one day he himself is going to be the leader of the people, the leader of the people. And it was something that came over him, like a blanket that came over him, like a wall that shielded him and just kept himself within that blanket. And all he could do was think about himself. And so he went down to the river to go fishing. And he had his gaff hook, his hook, and he's like, hoo, 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 pulling one fish after the next. Hoo, hoo, hoo. Soon he had a big pile of fish behind him. Hoo, 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 hoo. Ah, and it was his uncle that yelled over to him, "Oh, you're catching too many. Do you need that many? I hope you give it to her. Oh, spread it out amongst the people." That same uncle went over to his smokehouse, and there in his smokehouse, on all the skewers were all the rotted fish that he didn't take care of. So the people got together, those uncles, and they were talking, and they brought him in and says, "No, you cannot waste this food. They give of themselves to us. We need to give it to the people. We only take what we need." And this young man who was covered with this blanket of self-centeredness, only thinking about himself, he thought, they're just jealous. They are just jealous because one day I'm going to be the leader, and I'm good at everything that I do. They're just jealous of my skills, of who I am. Ah, nonsense. And he went down back to the river. He had his gaff, his spear, and he was looking. And as he was looking on that rock, beautiful large salmon came by, the biggest he'd ever seen. He goes, look at this one. When the people see me get this one, yes, for sure, they will respect me even more. So he waited and waited and waited. And so as that salmon came by, hoo, 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 he got that salmon and he was shaking. He was fighting that salmon. And that salmon put up a big fight. That salmon started to pull him into the river. But with his pride and his ego, he would not let go. He wouldn't let go. He hung on, and that salmon drug him further out down the river. That salmon drug him further out to the sea until he disappeared. When that young boy, that young man, he woke up, he opened his eyes, and there he found himself and the world and the village of the salmon people. And he looked around at all the salmon, all his relatives, and they took him in. They said, welcome, welcome, welcome. Come, come. Let us show you. Let us show you. Let us show you. And so the salmon people took him around, showed him underneath the ocean, deep, deep down into the cold waters, back up. Showed him those that he needs to avoid. The sea lion, the killer whales, even the birds up above that would come down, the eagles would come down who would snatch him. They taught him about when he himself was just an egg, went down, down into the ocean, down the river to the ocean. They also taught him about not only life, but death. About when it is time for them to give of himself, that his body would go back into the earth, and the very roots of the trees would take him in as nutrients. And that when those people, he would give himself to the people for the food, the nourishment. He learned all these things, all these things. And as time went by, he didn't know if he was there for a month, a year, 2 years, 3, 4. But it was one day that he just had a sense that it was time to go back home. So he was swimming with all the other salmon, and they were jumping out of the water, finning in the water, in joy and happiness, dancing, because it was time for them to go back home, back to the river that they were born in. And as that young man, he was swimming back up the river, he recognized it. This is the same river I used to fish at. And he went by a rock. That's the same rock I used to fish on. And on that same rock was another young man waiting, poised with his spear, with his gaff. And when he struck, hoo, hoo, the young man who is now a salmon felt it pierce his side. And at first he struggled a little bit, and then he just surrendered and gave of himself to the people. This young man who got this salmon, this large salmon, he picked it up. Oh, look at this one, look at this one. But there was something different about this one. On the tail, there was a big copper ring. And he called over the elders, look, look, look what I've caught. But look at his tail. And the people recognized him. Oh, they took that salmon and laid it down. They laid it down on ferns. They laid it down on the skunk cabbage leaves, laid it down on the earth in such a respectful way, saying, this is the one who disappeared years ago. And they took those ferns, covered it. The skunk cabbage leaves covered it. And then they took a blanket and covered it again. And then they started to sing over it. And as they sang, as Salmon transitioned back into a young man, that young man who disappeared years ago. And he stood and they covered him. Welcome back. Welcome. Welcome back, nephew. It's good to see you. And that young man, he rose, knowing more, wanted to teach the ways of the salmon, wanted to teach the people. And he apologized for his arrogance before, for he became more humble and he worked for the people themselves. He became that leader, but he became a good leader, loving leader, respectful, honorable leader, honorable leader. Ah, so I tell that story. You see, I tell that story, because I wanted to talk about new directions. And I tell that story because it's a story of transformation. It's a story of transformation. It's a story of change. You see, I feel at one time myself, I used to be that like that young man when I was younger, good at everything I did, very arrogant, very arrogant, had a big head, thought I knew everything, thought I knew everything. And it was this program I went to, people from the village, the reserve in BC called Alkali Lake. And at one time, this lake, this community, this reserve in BC, everyone in that community, all the adults were drinking. There was violence, there was abuse, hurt, harm, and so many other secrets that happened behind closed doors. And it was a young girl. It was a young girl. Ivy is her name. Is her name. And she had enough. She took all her mother's whiskey bottles and wine bottles, and she took those bottles and she poured them down the sink. And she smashed them into the trash. And she says, I have had enough. That young girl, that little girl, she put her foot down. I have had enough. Never again, no more. It's as if I'm reminded of a story about how a young man stood up to a cannibal giant. He stomped his foot down, said, never again, no more will you feed on the flesh of my people. And that's what this young girl did. Never will you feed on the flesh and blood of my people. As she took that alcohol bottle and smashed it down. Her mother came in and says, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? Who are you to do this? And that young girl, I don't want to live with you anymore. I don't even want you to be my mother. And with those words, it's as if a spear struck right into the heart of her mother. And she realized what she was doing. And tears came down her eyes, her face. And she made a choice at that moment to take a new direction, live a life of sobriety, live a life of healthy wellness, and to search for it, to look for it, to find it, to learn about it. Just from the stance of a child, her child. And sure enough, she did. She followed that lead. At first, it was only herself. It was only herself. And then the local spiritual leader, the pastor there, joined her, and there were two people. And then she convinced her husband, Andy, you need to join us. They joined AA, joined a program, started to learn about themselves. And then there were three. Then they got and pulled in eventually more, 4, 5 people, 6, and soon that whole reserve started to take a look at themselves. And that too reminds me of a story about how a young girl, a little girl, she went to the middle of the village just to tell the story she heard from the spirit of her grandfather, just to tell the story. And at first she was afraid, but she told the story. And at first nobody listened, but one by one the people stopped to listen. And when then she was done telling the story, she got the only old thing that was left in the community was a bag of seeds, a basket of seeds, and she passed it around and fed everybody, then fed themselves and fed those who could not feed themselves. And then she says, this is when the people started all over again, planting those seeds. How do we plant those seeds? How do we create that new direction, that change? That change? How do we take off if we're covered with that blanket of arrogance, that blanket of ego? How do we take that off and become, open our hearts, become that human being? We need to make that choice here and here. I've seen individuals, man, they were on the streets. They were like just ugly people. I want to talk to you about an individual I know, and his name was Stan. I'll leave it at that. But Stan, man, he was a fisherman. He grew up fishing there in Southeast Alaska, and he was just tough. He was mean. I grew up with his son, Mike, and Stan, and to wake you up in the middle of the night, you out there fishing. He just had this blowhorn from the a big truck. Just he'd go off, and he was always yelling. He's always screaming. It's just like calling people like names and cussing at them. Everyone hated fishing with Stan. Everyone hated fishing with Stan, but they went with him anyways because he caught the most fish and they always made money. But Stan one day had a heart attack on his boat, his fishing boat, and he fell down. He fell down. He was laying there, and as he was laying there, his crew actually were wondering, should we save him? Should we save this grumpy old son of a bitch, or should we just let him there and let him die? They saved him. They called the Coast Guard. They got him, and they took him in, and it was that time that Stan made a choice to change his life. And I wonder how many times is it going to take? I mean, so many of us, we don't change until we like maybe have that near death experience, eh? But why do we wait until then? Why do we wait until our life is there in our palms or the palms of somebody else to change, to make a new direction? Why? You know? And Stan, he made that change. He made that change. And so Stan became this here human being who just decided to love. And he became a human being who decided to choose love. He became a soft human being, a loving human being, respectful, honorable. He'd go to the sweat lodges. Because of his heart condition, he could not go into the sweat lodge. So he sat out and he tended the fires. And he listened to everything, all the stories that were going on inside the sweat. And as they came out, he fed the people. He gave them water. He gave them a blanket if they needed a blanket. He told stories to them. He cooked for them. I really enjoyed my time sitting there and really knowing Stan. And so Stan went back out fishing and still caught the most fish. That's what he knew. But the crews that worked with him now, it says they loved to work with him because he was respectful. He enjoyed the moment. He enjoyed the moment because that moment was almost taken away from him like that. He enjoyed the seagulls, the eagles, the water, the storms themselves, and the hard work. And he enjoyed the fish that came to him in abundance. It was one day that Stan, he just he was on his boat and he fell over, he collapsed again. He had another heart attack. But it was this time that his crew came around him. They cradled him. They cradled him. They held him. And they said, Stan, what can we do for you? What can we do for you? And Stan's last words were, just love me. Just love me. And that's what they did as they held Stan in his last moments on this earth. They loved him. I like talking about Stan, and I love the memories that I have about him. But choices, new directions, hope, love. And again, I ask the question, why do we wait so long? We have a lot of healing to do. A lot of us are hurt. We have a lot of healing to do. But what is that? How do we do that? How do we do that? I just want to say thank you, everybody who's watching, who's coming in here. I taking a look at some of these. Mike Duncan, hey brother. And I just want to say, um, hey Mike, good to see you. Mike's another brother out there, man. No, he's out there doing the work with the men in his community. And I'm going to share the story about Mike, and because Mike, he shares it openly, and we've had conversations about Mike at one time. He talks about men stopping the violence, the hurt, the harm, the abuse, and but he talks about how he at one time used to be that, an abusive man, an addictive man, angry man, and then how he can change, and I've had the opportunity to work with Mike, and I've seen him change. I've had conversations with him, and I've seen him change. We've had conversations about the same very thing, this this topic, and now he's out there teaching other men to heal, to heal. And I like having discussions with Mike just because I need to heal myself, and it's somebody I can talk to about about being real, authentic. And one of the things that Mike and I talked about is like so many of these organizations, so many people out there who are doing this work, this healing work and such. We need to come together, but even we need to come together and heal ourselves. We need to come together and have this here ceremony of forgiveness. It's not about like them against us against them, or who's better, who's not. We're all doing the same thing, moving forward in a new direction, or maybe even a re indigenized direction of healing, of healing. And so, brother Mike, man, I just want to acknowledge you and the work that you do, brother. And I saw another sister on there, Grace. Hey, Grace. I saw it was your birthday not too long ago. Yeah, happy birthday. And so many people too. Sometimes their birthdays is like they their birthday is the day they became sober. Yeah. They made a new direction. They made a new choice. They made a choice to live a good life. Now, being sober from drugs and alcohol, is it easy? Nah, it takes hard work. 'Cause you got to take a look at yourself. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to take a look at ourselves. I have a hard time taking a look at myself and being honest with myself. I have faults. Yeah. One day I hope to be a good elder, maybe if I get there. Yeah. Honorable elder. And one day I'm going to be an ancestor. And when that time comes to be an ancestor, I hope Stan is right there. I saw somebody on here, they acknowledged Stan. They knew that family. Amy. Yeah. Yeah. Right on. I'm just kind of looking through some posts here, some chats, you know, and this whole thing about forgiveness too. Mostly that forgiveness for yourself, eh? Right on. Jennifer, good to see you. Ceremony. Hey, about that new direction too. Or new directions. My path when I got involved in new directions. Um, and I want to go back. I kind of like went forward, and I do that sometimes. I just get scattered, and I just like go. So I'm going to reel myself back. Talk about Alkali Lake, and Alkali Lake, and so it was like this young girl. She made the decision. The family, the mother, the family, the community got together to become healthy, well, and then they started to go. What as a community of Alkali Lake, they went out into the other parts of First Nations and Canada, BC, and they came over to Alaska. And it was that time when they came over to Alaska. I believe I was like 23 years old or something like that. I was a young guy. I had all my black hair. It was dark. I didn't have any wrinkles. I had more of the hair, and uh, thought I could take on the world, man. I was climbing mountains. I was riding my bike all over the place, fishing, this and that, and I was partying, doing a lot of partying at the time, drinking, and hanging out with other men, guys with egos about this big, and what happened was my mother, she walked into the room, and as my mother walked in, there was something about her. Have you ever noticed those individuals who are doing the work, man? They're doing the work, and then there's something about them. There's like a glow. There's an energy that just radiates off of them. Do you know any of those people? I mean, and if you know like an elder, a true elder, not an older, an elder. And that elder walks in and they just radiate that energy. They radiate that spirit and they affect everyone in the room with that energy. But my mother, when she walked into the room, she was just radiating with that. I mean, she always is, anyways. But this time I was going, Mom, what the heck is going on? Where have you been? And she turned and looked at me. She says, I was just at this here gathering with a group of people from Alkali Lake. And I can't tell you about it because it's too hard to describe what we went through. But it changed my life. And then she looked at me and she said, would you like to go? And at that moment, I was going, yeah, that sounds cool. Yeah, I'll go check it out. So a few months later, when that time came to actually attend,